Okay, how's the audio coming through?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
All right, guys. I'm joined today by the legendary Robin Black, MMA. Robin, thanks again for joining the show. How you doing today?
Good, man. Yeah, doing good. I'm in quarantine in Toronto. It's been a weird adventure. When you come in back to Canada, they put you in a hotel quarantine first. It's supposed to be 2 days. Mine was like almost 5 and bad Wi-Fi, and it's just been a weird one. But you got to accept whatever is happening. I get to travel around and commentate and analyze martial arts for a living. I mean, if I got to stay in a hotel and eat whatever they give me and just wait till I pass a test because it's 2021, that's what you got to do, then that's what you got to do.
Right. But were you not at Bellator 258 last night?
I was not. I'm in quarantine, so I can't leave the country. So I was analyzing Bellator 258 from my couch, and it's really my relationship with Bellator is, of all my partnerships, it's like the coolest. They put me in a little loop with the guys sitting at the cage, and I can literally be like, dude, can I have that finish? And he'll be like, yeah, stand by. And then he'll send me a link, and then I'll put it in my trusty iPad or computer, and then I'll build my analysis, I'll voice it, and then I just put it out in the world. And they give me footage, and I'm gainfully employed to be able to do that however I want and my way. It's really, really the freedom, the artistic freedom is super cool. And like I said, like 10 minutes after the fight, I've got a video of Michael Venom Page kicking Derek Barbaric in the face in my computer already that I can play with.
Yeah, that was brutal. Okay, so my first question for you, sir, is what's the origin story behind the iconic bink?
So I wouldn't use the word, I was actually thinking of the word contrarian. I don't think I'm a contrarian. I don't think that's accurate, but by the time things are popular, I don't like them. Okay. Like I tend to think something about formulas bothers me. I tend to feel like in art, and fighting is an art, talking about fighting is an art. Podcasting to talk about fighting, talking about fighting is an art. I mean, we do art. That's what we get to do. And I feel like formulas and overly like traditions and stuff and things that everybody's doing, I just somehow naturally already get bored of it quick. So everyone was like, boom, boom, power, man. Everyone's screaming and yelling and I'm not judging them. That's what people are feeling. Some people, like, it's inspired by Rogan. Rogan fucking loves martial arts. He's an enthusiastic guy. He's a unique thinker. He's a comedian. He's a brilliant man. And that's how he reacts when shit, but then everybody just imitates Joe. And I wasn't trying to not imitate Joe. I was just like, God, everybody's like, I don't feel the natural inclination to scream boom at the top of my lungs or oh my God or whatever. Although I love it when Joe does it because it's authentic to him. Some other people, it's maybe a little more like they're just imitating Rogan, whether they realize it or not. So something in me started going, pink. Like, I guess because that's, if you hear enough boom at the top of your lungs, then naturally for me, the opposite starts to happen. My brain works as a hard swinging pendulum. And so I just started doing that. And I think within about 15 or 20 of those, it occurred to me, maybe 30, and I didn't do them every time. It started actually to consciously occur to me. It's like, this is kind of a thing. It's funny. I like it. It feels right. That's actually the sound sometimes I hear when that happens. So there was a point at which I consciously was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing that. But at first it was just like, it just felt more honest to me to say bink than to scream whatever everybody else screams.
Gotcha. So next thing I got for you is, what are your thoughts on the 10-point must system in MMA? I know a lot of people are trying to think maybe we should go to a half-point system or score the fight in the entirety like one championship. What do you think is best?
In a perfect world for me, in a world that doesn't exist, there would be no scoring, no rules, very few rules, no time limit. People would fight until somebody gives up or until a ref stops somebody to protect the fighters. That's what I don't think you need, but that's a perfect fantasy world as a martial arts purist. Yeah. And fighting doesn't take place in a fantasy world for a martial arts purist. It takes place in a modern sporting environment. But at the same time, like a lot of these things, I just kind of accept them because I don't think I can change them. And I just work within them. A lot of boxers and then now MMA fighters, if you look and you go, what do you think of the 10-point must system? They'll have an opinion one way or the other. But if you say, is it likely to stay? They'll say yes. Okay, so if it's likely to stay, what should we do? We should figure out what the reps are seeing and what the judges are seeing and work within that. Do I think it's perfect? No. Do I think many of the changes that we would try to change would be better? Probably not much better. So like judging too, people will be like, this 3-judge thing, maybe we need 6 judges. And I'm like, 6 shitty judges is not better than 3 shitty judges. So a lot of these things, it is what it is. But yeah, in a perfect world, no time limits, no scoring, just fight until somebody wins. That's what I would think is the purest.
That's some old school UFC 1 type stuff.
Yeah. That's it would be so great. I actually talked Joe Rogan again. Brought this up before, and then when I was on a podcast with him, I think we talked about it again. He quite rightly said, "I don't even want a fighting environment necessarily. Like, just let them fight in a field." And I think that would be really interesting too. There's no barriers. Let's fight. Okay. Well, what if I run as hard as I can until you run after me because you're tired, and then we'll fight? It's cool. What if I run, but then you don't run? Maybe we're going to stand there for like 6 hours and nobody's going to do anything. Well, that might not be the best from a sporting standpoint, but it would be fascinating. There are some fights that happen. There's a movie called Knuckle.
Okay.
I urge everybody to watch it. So I commentate bare knuckle boxing in England, like a real tradition. It's called BKB, and it is from the tradition of bare knuckle boxing. It's not modern, take the gloves off and hype it up and yell really loud. It's like it comes from the real tradition of bare knuckle boxing. And so once I was into that, and really enjoying it and the culture of it, this documentary called Knuckle follows these bare knuckle Irish traveler families fighting each other. And some of those fights would be hours. Like they would fight for hours. Like it was an endurance. Fighting became an endurance sport, which is really interesting. And of course, at any time you can knock a guy out, it's not an endurance sport. It's brain trauma. But yeah, it's fascinating. I'd urge you to watch that documentary. You'll love it.
Okay, I'll watch it and I'll get back to you on my thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So about a month or so, or 2 months ago, we saw Aljamain Sterling receive a knee to the head when he was grounded from Peter Yan, and Peter lost his belt. A week later, Adriano Moraes does the same thing to Demetrius Johnson, and he defends his belt. I think it's a weird thing that it's okay in this organization and not in this organization. Do you think knees to a grounded opponent should be opened up globally, or what are your thoughts on that?
People judge me harshly for saying this, but I don't think there should be rules of any kind. Like I know that sounds awful, and the reason we cannot have no rules of any kind is because there would be very dangerous and bad consequences for about a year or two. Yep. If eye gouging was legal, which of course that makes me squirm, and I don't like that. I don't like the idea of anyone getting eye gouged. But what I do like is 5 years in the future when nobody ever gets eye gouged again, because martial arts would change in such a way that we would I cannot have you eye gouging me. So I would need to prioritize never getting eye gouged. And that would shape a pure martial art. So 5 years from now, I love the idea of there being no rules whatsoever. Sadly, the reason we can never have that is the 5 years to get there. We'll all be biting each other's faces off, and we can't have that. So clearly we cannot have this. But to answer your question more concisely, I think we should be able to knee the head of a downed opponent.
Right.
I think we should have less rules. Can we have no rules? Biting, eye gouging? No, clearly we cannot. But should we have less rules? Yes, we should. If kicking or kneeing the head of a downed opponent is legal universally, the game will change in such a way that we will change the way you and I are fighting. I will change my behavior so that I rarely get much less frequently get kicked or kneed in the head. So the game itself changes. So imagine, currently, what in wrestling they call it 4 points: two feet or legs, knees, whatever, and my hands. I'm down. I'm on all fours.
Yep.
Right now, you'll grab my body. You'll put your leg over my heel. You'll punch me. Maybe you'll grapple with my arm. A lot of things happen there. If you could kick me there, you literally stand up and kick me. That entire position will change.
Yes.
Everything about the way we fight will change. If you're in my guard right now, you're going to try to like pin my arm so I cannot strike you. And then you're going to try to like come over top with strikes. But if while you're in my guard, I can take my legs and just simply kick you in the face, that will change the game. So the game will change as that's allowed. It should be allowed. Yes, I believe you should be able to knee and kick the head of a downed opponent. It makes no sense. I can kick you in the head standing there. I should be able to kick you in the head somewhere else. And it will be on us and our coaches and the game itself to change in such a way to protect ourselves. Because our priority as a martial artist competing in a prize fight is to protect myself. And so the game will change to protect myself.
When people ask me about it, like, is it any worse than the elbow Dominic Reyes received from Yuri or the flying knee Ben Askren? Like, it's just as violent.
Of course. So when I was fighting, there's so much to be learned at every stage, which is why it's such a wonderful experience. And, I couldn't do my job the way I do it without it, right? At every point, there's different things to learn. And so when you go to become licensed to fight, you have to get a lot of medical tests. We do that to make sure you're healthy enough to compete in a very dangerous sport. So they check your brain, they check to make sure your hands are not injured. They're looking for evidence of hernia. They check your heart, they check your breathing, they check your blood, they check you to make sure you're safe. HIV, hepatitis. I have a buddy. Not all commissions check for all these things, but one of the things they checked for was syphilis, and he had it. And the commission somehow inadvertently let that be known to the promoter, who then told. So everybody knew my friend had a blood disease that he had got in a way that he got it, which is awful. But they're supposed to protect your sensitive information. I'm not going to say his name, but he knows who he is. So they check all of these things to make sure you're safe. So I had 9 professional fights, and I had a couple that one I was injured, and a couple that the opponents withdrew. So I probably had to get my medicals done for professional combat 12 to 13 times. And when they do all the tests, I went to one doctor, and he was like, "I won't do these." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "I don't think this should be done. I don't think this should be I can't, as a doctor in my own, I don't feel it's right to answer these questions truthfully, to then allow you to go do something I don't believe in," which I found to be really, really, I was surprised, because that kind of goes against what you think a doctor's supposed to do. You just answer these truthfully. What happens with that information, we'll do later, but he just wouldn't do it. So I spoke to another friend of mine who is a doctor, Dr. Faisal Raymond, who was a UFC ringside doctor at UFC events in Toronto. And he said, "Listen, the way to keep fighters the safest way to have you is to not have you fight at all." Right? If our priority is we don't want you to get injured in a fight, then we shouldn't let you fight. But if we decide that this in a free society, you and I are free to get the medical requirements necessary, train our whole lives, to put ourselves in this environment, to test ourselves, entertain others, earn a living, whatever, we live in a free society that decides we can do that. Once we've decided to do that, you're 100% correct. Like Ben Askren getting flying kneed by Jorge Masvidal is in no way more dangerous, more violent than kneeing the head of Aljamain Sterling when he's got his hand down. Right? It isn't. So you're 100% correct.
Well, it's a small world, because Dr. Faisal Raymond was the doctor that did my medicals when I used to amateur box. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Oh man, he's the man. Like, he's such a great guy. People can follow him maybe on Facebook. He had a few fights. So Dr. Raymond, he's a brilliant man. He's a brilliant man and a brilliant doctor and a brilliant human. But among the reasons he's a great fight doctor is he had a couple of fights. I commentated one of his professional kickboxing fights in London at an event. He's had boxing fights. I believe he had an MMA fight as well. And he's in his 40s and later 40s. Many of us love many different things, and we have a different relationship with the thing. To be a fan of fighting is a wonderful thing. You had boxing contests. You have a different relationship with it now, one that you cannot explain to people who have not had that experience. And that is true. I'm getting excited. I literally almost spit. That is true of Dr. Raymond. He can become. There's not many ringside doctors who also fought. It changes your understanding. You cannot understand fighting, truly understand it, without fighting. You can't. If you have 1,000 fighters, they will agree with that. If you have 1,000 non-fighters, some of them will argue, "Oh, bro, of course you can."
Yeah. I agree. Okay, so we've seen in the past couple of years that Risen and Bellator have been doing co-promoted events. 2020, the pandemic hit. The PFL let Kayla Harrison go fight in Invicta, and I think another promotion as well. Yeah. You think going forward we're going to see more cross promotion, and is that something that could enhance the sport potentially?
We will see more of it everywhere except for the UFC.
Okay.
It's just now. I shouldn't say that universally. If you ask anyone in that business, they'd be like, "Fuck no." However, if you ask them 7 years from now, with any changes that are happening in the world, they might respond differently. They might, but today they believe they never would. It could, because if you ask Jay-Z about guesting with Beyonce before he met her, he'd be like, "I don't know, guess." The world changes, right? Collaborations are powerful, but I would say my belief is the UFC will not do it, but I think everybody else will, and I think it will be good. You get to a point. It's a weird position in time, because who and what we are, whether we run a business, you have a podcast, what else do you do? You work, you study.
I'm a massage therapist.
Okay, that job will change. Your podcast will change. These things will all change. A massage therapist is fascinating because it's very physiological. So as somebody, you've done athletics, you've been competitive. Now you study the relationship of the body to itself and to other parts of the body. It's an interesting blend of things. But yes, so who and what everything is changes. The UFC right now is different, not just bigger, which it is, not just more mainstream, which it is, but even how we see it is different. There should have been no place for bare knuckle boxing to be able to get bigger. The UFC shouldn't have had that. That shouldn't have been possible. There shouldn't have been a place for Triller to kind of come along and do this, but there is, and so that changes. The UFC is the biggest thing in our area of combat sports, but that will change, and their relationship to the world around them will change, and their relationship to the audience will change. If you're 17, Triller, you might think Triller is the coolest thing ever, and the UFC is the shit your dad likes.
Mm-hmm.
You might think that. That's a lot different than how it was seen in 2011. So that might cause them to behave differently. It might not. Because, one thing about them that has been strong and led by Dana, who I consider a friend. I like him. He's an interesting guy and a smart guy and a driven guy. He's bullheaded. He's like, he has, and in an admirable way and in ways that aren't always admirable, he's been like, fuck those guys. Fuck that. We'll crush them. That's part of the defining nature of who he's been. Now, he can change. Businesses can change. But, yeah, I would suspect they won't do it. But I do think Bellator will do more. I do think, Logan Paul is doing a fight of some kind, exhibition or something with Floyd Mayweather. No, that Paul. The other one does a thing on Triller, and this one's on Showtime. Well, logically, those two things will intermix at some point. Ryzen and Bellator, they mix. So as these things happen, it benefits, on some level, we are collaborating our little worlds of talking about martial arts. This is always a good thing. So at some point, maybe the UFC will do it too. But currently, that is certainly not their model. But that could change.
Right. Okay, so that brings me actually to my next question. What are your thoughts on Jake Paul? I guess both Pauls, the Paul brothers, and their role in combat sports. Is it enhancing or is it taking away from the game?
It's very difficult. It's probably both, and maybe in equal parts. So therefore, it's a wash, right? They're novice boxers. It's inverted, right? At one time, if you were a brilliant boxer or a brilliant rapper or a brilliant, like that famous guy who is a physicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, brilliant physicist, whatever, you became famous. After you became famous for doing something extraordinarily well, some famous people went and said, well, maybe I'd like to do another thing. So the history of successful athletes who tried to have a country album or a hip hop album or a rock album, there's been a lot of them, right? The Rock was a WWE star. Now he's a pro wrestler. The difference with this is they became famous first and then later went there. I don't know what it was, where they came from or how this happened. I know one guy was a Disney kid, and YouTube, being a YouTuber is a thing. But you used to do a YouTube channel because you were good at something. They became good at just doing YouTube, I guess, right? Now they're famous. People are paying attention. So even though they're only novice boxers, if they were novice singers, it would be the same. They, as famous people with leverage, famous people have leverage, they say, I want to make an album. If they, instead of boxing, said, I want to make an album, everybody would come along and say, well, I'll play in your band. We'll sell your record, whatever the thing is, because they're famous. Boxing has done the same thing. Now, what made them famous was acting like assholes. I mean, at least from some people's perspective. So they do a lot more of that. They are novice boxers. Also, we, the audience, have lost the ability to discern expertise. We don't have to do it anymore. We can turn on any sports or television or news channel, and anybody can be, MMA analyst so-and-so. Never fought a day in his life, right? A CNN chief political analyst, so-and-so. He's a journalist, right? So we now don't really know what good is. We've lost the ability to understand what expertise is and how it's achieved. So we, the audience, are a little dumber, let's be frank, a little easier to manipulate. We're manipulated by fame and making fun of each other and conflict and controversy. So they're harvesting that. We don't know what good boxers are. There are people who think they're great boxers. The reason they cannot be great boxers is because we know how skills are developed. If you don't understand how skills are developed, you'd be like, well, this guy's fucking killer. He'll knock out Floyd Mayweather. But if you do understand how skills are developed, it's deliberate practice over time with expert feedback and hard work. And time and dedication and expertise is an element. No human in the history of humans has ever become a master of something that normally takes 20 years. No human's ever done that in 4 years. Is it likely to be these famous rude YouTubers who break that mold? Probably not. They're probably still novice boxers who are very famous, who are very provocative, who attract attention. I'm interested because I was really curious what a possibly juiced up, I don't think they drug test them, not that matters, it's just a reality, I'm not judging. Maybe he's juiced up, maybe he's a super athlete, wrestled in high school, is a novice boxer with access to some high-level training. Now, all great novice boxers can access high-level training. Doesn't matter how famous your training partner. So, novice boxer who's super athletic, who handles pressure well, how does he do against a lifelong wrestler, combat athlete with a lifetime of combat training, but very little specialized boxing training? I was curious about that. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. I never get to see that. We never get to see a novice boxer fight a lifelong combat artist who has very little, specific specialization. I'm interested. Am I interested in what they say about each other's wives? No, but some people are. So I don't think it harms anything because we're all long. I believe, and maybe this is very sort of, maybe this is the, I'm not a negative person, but maybe this reveals some negativity in the way I look at it. I think we're long past thinking that, boxing is going to be, or fighting or politics or whatever is going to be negatively affected by people acting like assholes. People acting like assholes on TV and YouTube and the radio and podcasts and politics and the president and fucking whoever, anywhere, for decades now. So I don't think these guys are going to cause great societal harm. I don't think they're going to cause harm to boxing. I think if anything, there'll be some good in there in that a lot of what we do and see in fighting is so formulaic. It's the same fucking presentation over and over. The fights are amazing, but it's like striker versus grappler in a stylistic matchup. Winner gets a title shot. Oh my God, is he the greatest of all time? Discuss. What's next for this guy? It's just nonsense, fucking nonsense. Maybe shit like this will make all that seem old and dumb. And it is old and dumb, And so maybe there's a value in it. Ultimately, what I just talked about is all packaging. If you remove the packaging, you move the logos and you remove talking heads and you remove ESPN and you remove Viacom and you remove all these things, what are you left with? You're left with the beauty of combat. That's what I'm interested in, personally. All this other shit, it's not really meant for me. So I don't really spend too much time on it. And like I said, I am curious what one of the greatest boxers of all time, when faced with a novice boxer who outweighs him by 30 pounds, how he'll approach it. Will he carry him? I don't. Would I be able to tell if he is? That's how good he is. I've only studied combat sports for 40 years. Would I be able to tell? 40 years is too little time to understand. 40 years and 9 fights and fucking purple belt in jiu-jitsu or whatever I've done. It's not enough information for me to truly understand what Floyd Mayweather is doing. Okay. Now that's interesting. I do understand how he will approach a fight with a novice. I'm curious about that. Will I watch it? Probably. Would I be okay if I didn't watch it? I'm sure I'd see it on the internet the next day, and I could fulfill my curiosity. Do I care if the guy's brother stole his hat? No.
Okay. All right, I got 2 quick ones for you, then we'll get you out of here. Sorry, do you think it was a blessing in disguise that Yoel Romero got pulled from the tournament? I feel like we saw a little bit of ring rust from Rumble last night.
I think, a fight with Yoel Romero is completely different, but we can't assume Yoel Romero would be the best Yoel Romero either. Yep. We also can't assume that Anthony would be sharper with the extra, like psychological realities of seeing Yoel. So, it's a completely different dynamic. He could be better because it's Yoel. He could be worse because it's Yoel. Yoel could be, not at his best. If he took a different route to the venue that day and he stubbed his toe, like it's all so different. So we don't ever really know. But I really thought the fight was cool. I thought, when you step up on a week's notice to fight Anthony Johnson and you presumably break your right hand in the fight and can get to him twice with left hooks, and AJ was like, mad at himself. And that's cool because that's what all great athletes are going to do. But the credit goes to that guy. The issue is I will never say that happened because this guy made an error. Never. Almost, and I shouldn't say never. I have a philosophy. Rarely say always or never, because that's not true. But I rarely want to blame an error, blame a victory on one guy's error. I was talking about this on my own podcast the other day. If you and I are playing poker and there are 3 kings up, and I got a king, and you got a queen, and then we lay it down, and somebody says, "Robin, what could he have done differently? What could Marshall have done differently?" I'd be like, "Well, he could have had a king." It's like, that's not fucking Marshall's. It's not in your control. The king came to me. We played the hands we had. And to a certain degree, and people don't necessarily understand this, and I'm still not, I've spent a decade trying to figure out how to explain this in a way that actually makes sense. But the fight that happens was written in the hours, days, weeks, months, and years leading up to it. Mm-hmm. What you do in that moment that results in me landing that thing is a function of what you've done in preparation for that moment. Your brain isn't, and when I do it this way, people sort of understand. Nobody thinks a fastball hitter is thinking, oh, I think it's a fastball, because it's gone, right? You don't have the time to think the way we typically think, which is in words and sentences. And it's the same thing. You can't be there. Oh, I'm going to slip, and then now I'm going to put weight on my rear leg. And what if I apply pressure? All the shit we say isn't actually going through the process. We're using words to explain something that is happening without words. Right. And our words are flawed, right? So if you get hit with that hook, that is a result of how you've trained your brain to react in those moments. And you know this from boxing, to react in those moments. You are not thinking, and you can't at the speed you're fighting this guy. You can't be like, oh, I see he's shifted his weight to the outside foot. Maybe if I try to, step to southpaw, like the shit's happening too fast for that. So your brain has to go on an autopilot. Yep. And as your brain, you are teaching it what to do in those moments. It is express, and this is my sort of theory of everything as it comes to fighting. The brain will perform the way it's been trained to perform if the artist is in an optimal state of focus and arousal. So we could work from backwards. If you are able to get yourself into a high performance state, which is not easy and most humans can't do it. How many amateur fights did you have?
I had, I think, 3 or 4, not many.
Yeah. So you probably never achieved that. Never that optimal state where you're like, holy fuck, everything is going. You're almost watching yourself and it feels easy. That, or it feels natural, at least. It's not easy. We don't achieve that state. We can do it by accident. Some people get really good at it. People have dealt with a lot of pressure. Somebody who may have, been in military, any number of things can prepare you. If you free climbed at any time, if you fall out of the state of flow, optimal performance while free climbing, you die. Right. So you become very good at it. And fighting is like that. But if you are in that state where you can allow your training to express itself freely, you are now expressing yourself based on what you've taught your body to do in the dynamics of what your opponent is doing. And then you're now responding in how you've taught your body to react or respond to what he's doing. It's happened. This shit's happening. So there is no reason to ever look and say, this happened because AJ fucked up. This happened because in the dynamic of the thing, when he was zigged and he zagged, this is the way it went down. They all naturally express themselves the way that they trained to do it. So as a result, it's the opponent's credit that AJ was dropped. And then it's AJ's credit that even though he didn't even realize he'd been dropped until he saw the tape, he was able to come back, focus in enough, and land that, pull, he pulled down on the guard and kind of yanked on it to throw the right hand in there. And that's to his credit. And this is the beauty of the fight. If he laid the guy out in 10 seconds, it wouldn't have been as great of a fight. It wouldn't have been as learning of an experience for him. Afterwards, he was like, I have to be better against Nemkov. That was good. If he laid that guy out in a second, he might be like, oh, man, I'm gold. Like, I'm ready for Nemkov now. So because of the extra challenge, it's like, where am I? What does he change? He doesn't change how I keep my hands, because that's a reflection of a lifetime of training. He changes his process. How do I prepare? How do I train? How do I get ready? What do I do in the days before, weeks before, hours before, minutes before? You change your process because it's by the time the fight is happening, it's all too late. That fight unfolds the way it unfolds in the beautiful, chaotic dynamics of fighting. Right. I completely agree with you. And do you have any message for your fans or our audience before we get you out of here? It's a cool time to get to do this. For me right now, it's a very, 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 I'm super grateful. Like, I don't know if everybody feels this way, but it feels like the old formulas, we don't have to do them. We don't have to, break down the main event, striker, grappler, break down the things, make a prediction. We don't have to call it. We don't have to use the same old terminology. We don't have to say, run it back, bro. We don't have to do any of the things that seem to be there. You can now examine, and in our case, we like to talk about combat, but people who examine music or painting or technology or whatever, it feels like we can now do it the way we want to do it. There's always pushback. There's a whole world, of people, when you'll do something, say, why don't you just do it the normal way? But there's no normal way. There are ways at which we do. Oh, I have to get off because this is literally the government checking that I'm in quarantine.
Okay, thank you for the time, Robin. I appreciate it.
Cheers, my friend. Okay, bye. Hello?